The sound of the plate shattering against the kitchen tiles was the starting gun. There was no argument beforehand, not even a warning sigh. Just the sharp crack of shattering porcelain and Jacob's voice flat as the Midwestern plains. "That's it, Maya. I'm done." I didn't flinch. I kept scrubbing the pan where I'd made the eggs for his breakfast. The hot water burned my already red, rough hands. 10 years of hot water, of bleach, of rubber gloves. 10 years. "Aren't you going to say anything?" he asked from behind me. I could feel his presence near the door, likely in his expensive suit, the one I ironed daily, smelling of a cologne that was no longer the one I'd given him. "You've said it all, Jacob," I replied without turning. "Want another coffee before you go?" "For God's sake, Maya, look at you. Look at this house. Look at yourself." This time I dried my hands on my apron, the same cotton apron with little blue flowers I'd worn for 10 years. It had an oil stain on the hem from 3 days ago. I didn't have time to wash it. I never had time. I finally turned and looked at him. Jacob Thompson. My husband. The man I fell in love with at 22, with his easy smile and his promises to travel the world. Now he had grey at his temples and a permanent line of displeasure between his eyebrows. The eyes that once shone when they saw me now only showed weariness, a deep, accumulated weariness, like limescale on a faucet. "What's wrong with how I am?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You're like this." He made a vague gesture that encompassed my hair pulled back in a frayed bun, my old t-shirt, my pajama pants. Always in those clothes, always smelling like food or disinfectant. You've stopped caring for yourself, stopped caring at all. A heavy silence filled the kitchen. The only sound was the dripping faucet that had been crying out for a new washer for months. "Your parents," I said slowly. "Your father can't move. Your mother needs help with everything. Even taking her medication. The nurses only come for 2 hours a day. Who do you think does everything else?" "That's no excuse," he snapped, but he avoided my gaze. "Other women manage it, and they don't go through life looking like a cleaning lady." Right there I felt something. It wasn't pain. It was something colder, sharper, like a knife that had been rusting inside me, and suddenly someone hit it hard, and it broke. "I see," I said. Jacob took a deep breath, as if preparing for a speech he had rehearsed in his head. He pulled an envelope from his leather briefcase, placed it on the kitchen table, which was stained with crumbs and a coffee ring from that morning. "These are the papers. I've spoken to my lawyer. It's for the best, Maya. We're stagnant. This isn't a marriage anymore." I walked to the table, my hands still damp. I left a small wet mark on the wood. I opened the envelope without rushing. I pulled out the document. Mutual consent divorce. Black letters on white paper. I saw my full name. Maya Rose Thompson. I wouldn't be a Thompson for much longer. "Aren't you going to cry? Beg, ask, why?" Jacob's voice sounded strangely disappointed. He expected drama and ending that fit his narrative. The abandoned, broken woman acknowledging her failure. I had a cheap blue Bic pen in the utensil jar. I took it. I laid the document on the table, pushing aside a plate with toast crusts. I found the signature line. My hand didn't tremble once. I signed with the same calm I used to write the grocery list. "Maya." Jacob said, a note of disbelief in his voice. I folded the document, put it back in the envelope, and handed it to him. "Here you go. Do you need anything else from me today? Your mother has a physical therapy appointment at 11. I've left her clothes ready on the chair. The midday medication is in the pill organizer already sorted. It's time to change your father's catheter. The new ones are in the bathroom cabinet top shelf. And I've made a pot roast for dinner. It's in the fridge. You just have to heat it up." He took the envelope as if it were red hot. He stared at me, searching my eyes for any sign of pain, of rage, of anything. He only found exhaustion, an exhaustion so ancient and deep it had turned to stone. Is that all? He asked, stunned. For today, yes. I nodded, taking off my apron. I'm going upstairs to pack. I'll be gone before the nurse arrives. I went up the stairs, not to the large, bright master bedroom that had been ours. That room had been empty for me for years, ever since Jacob's father had his stroke, and we had to install the medical bed in the first-floor guest room. I slept on a small daybed in the study next to their room, to hear him if he called at night. My real space had shrunk over the last few years to a closet in the hallway and 3 drawers. I pulled out the suitcase, the same one I'd brought from New Orleans 15 years ago. It wasn't very full. I threw in some jeans, a few t-shirts, a sweater, underwear. Nothing from the master bedroom closet. Those clothes from a decade ago, from when we still went out. From when we were still Maya and Jacob, belonged to a ghost. To the woman who danced in jazz clubs in the French Quarter and laughed so hard, tears streamed down her face. That woman had died a long time ago, replaced by a functional, practical being. A being with useful hands for feeding, for cleaning, for changing a urinary catheter. In a drawer under a pile of clothes, I found a small cardboard box. I opened it. Inside was a tortoiseshell comb, a handkerchief embroidered by my grandmother, and a photograph. In the photo, I was 22. I was on a stage in a blood-red slip dress. My hair, wild arms, raised mouth half open in a cry of joy or spirit you could never tell. Behind me, blurry, was a young Jacob looking at me as if I were the sun. I closed the box and left it on the bed. It wasn't part of the practical woman. It was an archaeological relic. It had no place in the suitcase. As I passed my in-laws' room, I paused. The door was ajar. Inside, you could smell the unmistakable scent of sickness, disinfectant, talcum powder, medicine, and a faint sadness. Carol, my mother-in-law, was sitting in her armchair looking out the window. Her eyes, once so vibrant, were now a dull, pale blue. Arthur, my father-in-law, lay in the medical bed, connected to a machine that breathed for him with a rhythmic, mechanical sound. Carol turned her head slowly. "Did you break something?" she asked in her frail voice. "Yes, Carol. A plate. I'm sorry." She waved a hand as if shooing a fly. "It doesn't matter. Things break on their own." I looked at Arthur. His chest rose and fell with the machine. 10 years, 3,650 days. Baths, meals, diaper changes, sleepless nights listening to his breathing. Reading the newspaper aloud. The radio always tuned to the news station. 10 years of life reduced to this meticulous, painstaking, exhausting care. "I'm going out for a bit, Carol." "To the store." "Get eggs. Jacob likes eggs for breakfast." "Yes," I lied without remorse. "I'll get eggs." I went downstairs with the suitcase. Jacob was still in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, staring at the brown envelope, as if he didn't know what it was. "I'm leaving," I said. He straightened up. "Where are you going?" "That's not your concern anymore, Jacob." "Maya, wait. It doesn't have to be like this. We can talk about the terms, the alimony, the house. The house is yours. It always was. I just lived in it. I don't want anything else." "That's ridiculous. You have rights. After all this time." "After all this time." I interrupted him for the first time with a hint of something that wasn't exhaustion. "I just want my time. What's left of it." I opened the front door. The harsh, clear morning light of New York City hit me full in the face. It had been weeks, maybe months, since I'd been out at this hour. I was always inside within those four walls, attending to the sounds of machines, to Carol's whispers, to Arthur's eloquent silence. "And my parents?" Jacob asked. And in his voice there was something new. Panic. The panic of someone who suddenly realizes the magnitude of what they've broken. I stopped on the threshold. Without turning, I said, "The nurse arrives at 10. The emergency numbers are on the fridge held by a magnet. The primary care doctor visits on Thursdays. Goodbye, Jacob." And I walked out. I closed the door behind me. There was no slam, just the soft click of the well-oiled mechanism. I went down the 3 steps to the sidewalk. The suitcase made a dull sound on the pavement. I didn't look back. I knew he would be at the window watching me leave, perhaps waiting for me to break down, to turn and run back to beg for another chance. The woman he had known would have done that. The woman he had loved. But that woman had died a long, long time ago. The thing walking down the Upper East Side street with a half-empty suitcase and a heart turned to ash was something else. It was a ghost with useful hands. And ghosts don't cry. They just fade away. At the corner I stopped, took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust, of fresh brewed coffee from a nearby cafe, of the living, indifferent city. My phone in my pocket had a single notification, a message from my childhood friend Chloe, the only one who had never stopped writing year after year despite my silence. "You still alive out there, dancer?" I typed a reply with fingers that were just beginning to tremble now that there were no witnesses. "Yes, and I need a place to drop dead, just for a few days." The reply came instantly. "The key's under the flower pot. As always, the place is yours, and so is the wine." For the first time in 10 years, I felt something like a smile on my lips. It wasn't joy. It was something else. The first slight movement of ground that has been frozen for an eternal winter. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor. But it was there. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the bus stop. I didn't know who Maya Rose was. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in a decade, I was no longer Maya Thompson. And for now, that was enough. The buzz of Chloe's apartment door sounded like a shrill, cheerful shop bell, a brutal contrast to the sepulchral silence of the house on the Upper East Side. Before I could even look for the key, the door flew open. "Oh my God, Maya!" Chloe hadn't changed. Well, she had a few more grey hairs in her curly brown mane and pronounced crow's feet that spoke of laughter, not worry. She was wearing paint-splattered jeans and a t-shirt for a rock band I didn't recognize. She enveloped me in a hug so tight it knocked the wind out of me. She smelled of linseed oil, coffee, and freedom. "You scared the hell out of me with that text," she murmured against my shoulder, before pulling back to look me up and down. Her smile froze, then vanished. Her honey-colored eyes darkened. "Honey, what in the world happened to you?" "It's a long story, Chloe." "Well, get in. We have all the time in the world. And the wine, like I said." Her apartment in the East Village was the complete opposite of Jacob's neat, aseptic, and silent house. It was vibrant chaos. Canvases, some finished, others barely sketched, leaned against the walls. Drop cloths were spread on the floor. Books were piled on every available surface, and light, so much light, poured in through the large windows. Here, life didn't just happen. It screamed, it spilled over without control. "Toss the suitcase over there," she said, pointing to a corner. "The sofa bed is pulled out. It's yours for as long as you need. Now sit. I'm getting the Cabernet." I sat on a plush armchair covered by a colourful Andean blanket. I sank into it. The exhaustion, the real kind, the 10-year kind, hit me suddenly like a wave. Every muscle, every bone screamed. Chloe returned with 2 large glasses filled with a deep red wine. She handed one to me. "Drink." Then we'll talk. Or not. Whatever you want. I drank. The wine was strong fruity. It burned a little on the way down, but then it brought a warmth that spread from my stomach, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Jacob? Chloe asked directly. She was never one to beat around the bush. He gave me the divorce papers this morning. I signed them. Chloe didn't seem surprised. She nodded slowly, taking a sip of her wine. It's about damn time, Maya. My God, it's about time. How can you say that? Maya, honey, you've been dying a slow death for 10 years. We all saw it. Everyone but him, of course. Or maybe he saw it and just didn't care. The official reason: my old jeans, my dirty apron, that I've let myself go. I said, my voice flat as if reciting a grocery list. Chloe snorted with indignation. Please. And what has he been doing for those 10 years while you raised his parents? Because let's call a spade, Maya. You weren't caring for them. You were raising them. You got them up. You washed them. You fed them. You put them to bed. That's not caregiving. That's being a mother to 2 adults. Chloe's words, so raw, so precise, pierced me like darts. I put my hands to my face. I didn't cry. I was just so tired. I couldn't just leave them, Chloe. He was working, traveling. He was absent. Absent. Right. Very convenient. And you, the woman who used to dance her shoes to pieces, you became a shadow. An unpaid, unthanked nurse with not a single damn day off. I had one, I said, lowering my hands, looking at the wine trembling in my glass. When my mother died in New Orleans. He came home that day, took over, let me go. I was gone for 48 hours for the funeral. Then I came back. Carol, my mother-in-law, was furious. She said her broth didn't taste the same, that I had neglected Arthur. Chloe stood up furious and began pacing the room. I can't believe this. And what did you do? What was I supposed to do? I apologized and carried on. Arthur needed his catheter changed. Carol couldn't get out of bed by herself. There was no one else. Put them in a home, hire full-time caregivers. He could afford it, Maya. His business was booming thanks in part to having a slave at home doing the hardest work for free. I had never seen it like that, as slavery. To me, it was a duty, a heavy, suffocating duty, but one I took on the day I said I do, and even more so the day Arthur had the stroke and life stopped. You know what the worst part is, Chloe, I said, and my voice finally trembled a little. The worst part isn't the exhaustion or the lack of sleep or having to clean up vomit or feces. The worst part is the invisibility. You stop being a person. You're a pair of hands, a pair of watchful eyes, a voice that says, take your pill. Your name stops being Maya. It's hey, or you, or nurse. Jacob stopped seeing me years ago. His parents, well, to them, I was always the small-town girl who snagged their brilliant son, the lucky maid. Chloe sat beside me on the arm of the chair and put a hand on my shoulder. Tell me everything from the beginning. You need to let it out. There's no one else here, just you and me, and this magnificent cabinet. And so, with the afternoon light filtering through the dusty windows, surrounded by Chloe's creative chaos, I began to talk, and the words, trapped for a decade, came out like a flood. Flashback. 10 years ago. The phone rang at 3 a.m. Jacob grabbed it, startled. His face fell. What? Where, how is he? It was his mother, Carol. His father, Arthur, had fallen in the bathroom. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. We rushed to the hospital. The scene was cinematic. Fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, doctors with grave faces. Diagnosis: massive stroke. Probable partial recovery with severe after effects. Total dependence. Jacob fell apart. This was his hero, his father, the self-made man who had built his empire from nothing. I held him. It was what you do. Don't worry, I said, stroking his hair. We'll get through this together. 2 weeks later, Arthur came home from the hospital. He needed a hospital bed, a lift, a special wheelchair, oxygen IV medication, and 24-hour care. We'll hire someone, Jacob said, pale, looking at the hospital bills. But home nurses were exorbitant, and Carol, shattered by fear and pride, refused to let strangers see her husband in such a state. No, it's a disgrace. Family should take care of family. She'd say, her blue eyes, now filled with panic, fixed on me. I was 28. My career as a dancer in small New York clubs was just starting to take off. I had landed a steady gig at a place in the village. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was the light at the end of the tunnel of years of struggle. Jacob took my hands one night in our bed. Maya, honey, I know it's a lot to ask, but could you, just for a little while, until Mum gets used to it, until we find a better solution? You're stronger, more practical. I have to keep the business afloat. Dad can't anymore. If I don't work twice as hard, we'll lose everything. His eyes pleaded. I loved him. He was my husband. His family was my family. Just for a little while, I repeated like a mantra, convincing myself. I quit the club, quit my classes, put my dance shoes in a closet. I put on an apron. I learned how to operate the lift, how to change a urinary catheter, how to prepare parenteral nutrition, how to prevent pressure sores. I learned to decipher Arthur's grunts, to calm Carol's anxiety, to administer medication to deal with the nurses who came and went. The little while turned into months, then years. Jacob worked more and more. He went out with clients, came home late smelling of alcohol, and sometimes a cheap perfume that wasn't mine. I was too exhausted to ask, too empty to feel jealous. One day I tried on one of my old performance dresses. It wouldn't zip. My dancer's muscles had become the functional muscles of a caregiver, strong for lifting weight, but without grace, without flexibility. I looked in the mirror. My hair was dull, my skin pale, deep, dark circles under my eyes. My eyes had lost their spark. They were my mother's eyes, as after my father left her. Resigned eyes. That's when I stopped looking in the mirror. End flashback. And so, I concluded, emptying my wine glass, which Chloe had refilled silently several times, one day after another, 1 year after another, until this morning, until the broken plate. Chloe said nothing for a long time. Then she got up and went to the kitchen. She returned with this bottle and filled both our glasses again. You have to tell him, she said in a firm voice. Tell him what he lived it. He was there. No, Maya, he didn't live it. He passed through it. You lived in it. He has no idea what it was really like. He doesn't know you gave up your career. He doesn't know about your mother, I'm sure of it. He doesn't know you've been sick. I froze. How do you know that? Because 5 years ago at Lola's wedding you found me. You looked haggard. You told me you were losing a lot of weight, that you had these terrible pains in your abdomen. I told you to go to the doctor. You said you couldn't, that you had no one to leave your in-laws with. Did you ever go? I looked away. I couldn't. I thought it was stress. Then it passed. Or at least the pains became smaller, more manageable compared to everything else. Chloe closed her eyes, counting to 10. Maya rose. You are the most idiotic and brave woman I have ever known. Tomorrow you're going to a doctor. I have a friend, a gynecologist on Park Avenue. I'll make you an appointment. I don't have insurance. It was on Jacob's plan. Screw Jacob's plan, she cut in sharply. I'll pay. It's my welcome back to life gift. It's not up for discussion. For the first time, I felt a lump in my throat. Not of sadness, but of something different. Someone cared about me, about Maya, not about my useful hands. Thank you, Chloe. Don't mention it. Now another thing. What are you going to do? I don't know. I haven't thought past today. Past not having to change a catheter, not having to hear Carol complain about the salt in her food. Well, you're going to think. And you're going to start with this, she said, getting up and going to her bedroom. She came back with an old smartphone. It's an old one of mine. It has a new prepaid SIM card, your new number, Jacob's number in the trash. Or better yet, no. Keep it for legal stuff, but don't use it. From now on, this is your contact with the world. Your world. I took the phone. It was a strange light object, a symbol. He'll need me. For his parents. Jacob is a grown, wealthy man, Maya. Let him hire 10 nurses. Let him move in with them. Let him do what you did. It's his turn. You are done. Do you understand? You are done. The words echoed in the room. You are done. Not like Jacob's full of contempt. These were full of liberation, a final verdict. I'm scared, I confessed in a whisper. Of course you're scared. You've been in a prison for 10 years. Freedom is terrifying. But I swear to you, it's better, even if it's scary. Now dinner. I ordered pizza and wings. No pot roast, no purees. Food for living people. As we ate sitting on the floor around the coffee table, plates on our laps, my old phone, Jacob's phone, rang. The screen lit up with his name. Jacob. We looked at each other. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. A minute later, a text. I read it aloud in a monotone voice. Maya. The parents are very upset. Carol won't stop crying. She says she doesn't want the afternoon nurse. I don't know what to give them for dinner. I don't know how to heat the pot roast without overcooking it. Please call me. Jay. Chloe held out her hand. Give it to me. I gave her the phone. With a calm gesture, she opened the window. With a dramatic flourish that made a choked laugh escape my lips, she stuck her arm out and let the phone drop into the void. We heard a faint thud several stories below. Problem solved, she said, turning back with a satisfied grin. Now for the important stuff, ranch or blue cheese with the wings. That night on Chloe's sofa bed, surrounded by the smell of paint and the city, I fell asleep thinking about the sound of my old phone crashing against the courtyard pavement. I didn't dream of catheters or complaints. I dreamed vaguely of an empty stage and a saxophone just starting to play, searching for a melody. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood, old paper, and authority, a scent that made my skin prickle as I walked through the door. Chloe had wanted to come, but I forbade it. This was something I had to face alone, just as I had been alone all those years. My lawyer, Ms. Elvira Hayes, was waiting for me in the conference room. She was a woman in her 50s, with short, greying hair, dressed in an impeccable pantsuit. Her eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses were sharp and quick like a hawk's. She had been recommended by Chloe's gynecologist friend. She's a shark, Chloe had said. Just what you need. Mrs. Thompson, please sit, she said in a calm but firm voice. They'll be here in a few minutes. Let's review the key points. Before I could sit, the door opened. Jacob entered first. He looked flawless in a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly. Behind him was a blonde woman, a few years younger than me, in a tight dress and high heels. She carried a leather folder under her arm and wore a professional, cold smile. She was his lawyer. And behind them, with a slower step, came Jacob's own lawyer, an older man with a stern expression. Jacob looked at me. He probably expected to see me shattered in the same worn-out jeans and t-shirt from the day he left. Instead, I wore black pants borrowed from Chloe and a simple but clean blouse. I had pulled my hair back. I wasn't the radiant woman from before, but I wasn't the disheveled shadow from yesterday either. Something had changed, a stillness, a quiet determination. I saw his eyes widen for an instant in surprise before hardening again. "Maya," he greeted with a nod. "Jacob." I replied nothing more. We sat on opposite sides of the long oak table. Jacob's lawyer, Mr. Bermudez, began to pull out folders. The blonde Ms. Vega, as she was introduced, passed him documents with military efficiency. I just had Ms. Hayes and an empty notepad. "Well, Mr. Bermudez began in a gravelly voice. "Given that this is a mutual consent divorce and there are no children, everything should be relatively straightforward. Let's discuss the division of assets." Ms. Hayes inclined her head slightly. "Proceed." Jacob took the floor. His tone was the one he used in business meetings, impersonal, factual. "The main property, the apartment on the Upper East Side, was acquired by me before the marriage, with funds from an inheritance. It is therefore separate property. Maya has no claim on it." Ms. Hayes didn't flinch. "Agreed. Continue." "The joint savings," Jacob continued, "have been practically non-existent in recent years due to my parents' medical expenses. What remains in the joint account amounts to about $3,000. She can have half." $1,500, Ms. Hayes said, writing something on her pad. "For 10 years of marriage? Interesting. And alimony." Jacob frowned. Ms. Vega intervened, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "We see no basis for alimony. Mrs. Thompson is a young, able-bodied woman. During the marriage, she did not generate her own income. It's true, but that was a personal choice. My client did not prevent her from working." The air in the room thickened. Ms. Hayes put her pen down on the table with a sharp click. "A personal choice, you say? Does your client consider caring for two severely dependent individuals 24/7 for 10 years, without any remuneration, a personal choice comparable to, say, deciding not to accept a job? Caregiving for in-laws, however laudable, does not automatically generate a financial right," Ms. Vega replied without blinking. "It was an act of family will, not a profession. It was a non-monetary contribution to the household and to your client's net worth." Ms. Hayes's voice remained calm, but every word was ice. "A contribution that allowed him to fully dedicate himself to his business, which, according to my research, has tripled in value over the past decade. While my client was giving up her professional career, her health and her autonomy, your client was increasing his capital. That has a value, and it gets paid." Jacob shifted in his seat. "That's not the issue. I never forbade her from working. She could have arranged..." "Arranged what, Jacob?" I said. It was the first time I had spoken. All eyes turned to me. My voice sounded strangely clear in the silent room. "Arranged to leave your father who couldn't breathe without a machine alone, or your mother who couldn't get out of bed without help. Hire someone with what money your business was going through. Rough patches, you said. There was no money for extras. I was the extra, the free one." Jacob turned red. "It's not fair to simplify it like that. We all made sacrifices." "We all?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. "What sacrifices did you make exactly?" "The sacrifice of working in your office, of traveling for trade shows, of coming home at 10 p.m., when everything was already done, and asking if there was any dinner left." Ms. Vega coughed. "This is not the place for personal recriminations. We are here to agree on legal terms." "She's right. Ms. Hayes said, but she shot me a fleeting look of approval. Let's talk terms. My client gave up a promising artistic career. We have testimonials and contracts to prove it. 10 years of palliative and dependency care in the labor market represents an unearned salary of at least $50,000 a year. Multiply that by 10. Let's talk about compensation. Jacob turned pale. That's insane. $500,000, are you kidding me? It's not a joke, it's a valuation. We can take it to a judge, and a judge faced with evidence of career abandonment and exclusive dedication to the care of highly dependent direct relatives might even be more generous and add monthly alimony. You'd ruin me, Jacob said, staring at me, a mixture of rage and bewilderment in his eyes. No, I replied calmly. I don't want to ruin you. I don't want your money. There was a silence. Ms. Hayes shot me a warning look. Don't speak, it seemed to say, but I had to. What? Jacob asked, confused. I said I don't want your money. I don't want the alimony. I don't want the $1,500. I don't want anything that's in that house. Ms. Vega looked satisfied, Mr. Bermudez relieved. Only Ms. Hayes maintained an impassive expression, waiting. Then what do you want? Jacob asked cautiously. I want my things. My own things. The ones I brought to that house when I moved in with you. My memories. My old clothes. My books. My dance shoes. And I want you to leave me alone. Jacob watched me, trying to figure me out. He was looking for the trap, the trick. He couldn't conceive that I wanted nothing. That's it? He asked, incredulous. That's it. I renounce any claim on your assets, present or future. In return, you renounce any claim on mine, and we sign the divorce as soon as possible. Tomorrow, if we can. Ms. Hayes sighed almost inaudibly. She knew I was throwing away a potentially good settlement, but she also knew, because I had told her in private, that I wanted no ties, not even the ties of his money. I wanted a clean break, to burn the bridge. It's a more than generous offer, Mr. Thompson, Ms. Hayes said, addressing Jacob. You should take it. Jacob exchanged a look with his lawyer. Mr. Bermudez nodded almost imperceptibly. It was an excellent deal for his client, too good to be true. All right, Jacob said finally, but his voice didn't sound triumphant. It sounded empty, perplexed. I'll give you your things. You can come pick them up whenever you want. Just let me know. I'll come tomorrow morning at 10 when you're at work, I said, getting up. I don't want to see you. Maya, wait. Jacob stood up too. Is there anything else to discuss? I asked, my hand on the doorknob. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just a slight blink, a doubt that crossed his eyes like a fleeting cloud. He shook his head. I walked out into the hallway, followed by Ms. Hayes. Once outside, away from the door, she turned to me. That was foolish, Maya. A noble folly, but a folly nonetheless. You had the upper hand. We could have gotten something, even a symbolic amount, for your independence. I'm free, Ms. Hayes. That's priceless. And I don't want to be tied to him a minute longer than necessary, not even by a monthly bank transfer. I want him to disappear from my life as if he never existed. She looked at me with a strange mix of exasperation and respect. You're stronger than you look. Very well. Tomorrow at 11 at the county clerk's office. Be punctual. With this signed, it'll be official in 24 hours. Thank you. As I walked down the hall, I heard steps behind me. It was Jacob. He caught up to me, walking by my side. Maya, a moment. Tell me where you are, where you're going to live. That's not your concern anymore. Jacob! Of course it is, he said. and in his voice was a hint of the old frustration, the one he got when I wouldn't do what he wanted. God, why do you have to make everything so difficult, so dramatic? Just take the money. At least I don't want you to be on the street. I stopped and turned to look at him. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. I could also smell his expensive woody cologne, and underneath it, a faint, almost imperceptible trace of another perfume. A floral, sweet one. It wasn't mine. I never wore perfumes like that. I won't be on the street, and I'm not making it difficult. I'm making it easy for both of us. You take your freedom. I'll take mine. It's fair. Fair, he repeated, and a dry, bitter laugh escaped his throat. You call this fair, abandoning everything as if nothing happened, as if the last 10 years never happened. There it was, the core of his anger. It wasn't that I was leaving, it was how I was leaving. Without tears, without begging, without acknowledging his power, his ability to hurt me. I was supposed to be the shattered victim, and he reluctantly the one moving on. I had stolen his script. They happened, Jacob, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. They happened every minute of every day, and now they're over. That's all. Before he could answer, I turned on my heel and walked away. This time he didn't follow. As I stepped out onto the street, the New York sunlight hit me. I took out the new phone Chloe had given me. I had a message. How'd it go, Shark? Did you take his wallet or something more vital? I smiled for the first time in a long time, a real smile that reached my eyes. I renounced everything. I just want my stuff. Going to get it tomorrow. The 3 dots appeared immediately, showing she was typing. The reply took almost a minute. She must have been deciding between scolding me and supporting me. You're an idiot, but an idiot with class. Come home. I'm waiting with something stronger than wine. I walked toward the bus stop. I didn't feel light. I felt empty, like a building after a controlled demolition. All that was left was open space, the dust settling, and a strange, expectant silence. The silence that comes after the roar. Tomorrow I would enter that house for the last time. I would collect the remains of the woman I had been before I became a shadow, and then I would close that door forever. While waiting for the bus, a woman pushing a baby stroller passed by. She was humming softly. The baby was laughing. Further on, a group of tourists argued about which museum to visit. Life simple, noisy, normal was going on. And I, for the first time in 10 years, was part of it. Not as a caregiver, not as a wife, just as Maya. A woman with a new phone in her pocket, a blank future, and a past that was finally starting to weigh a little less. At 10 o'clock sharp the next morning, I rang the doorbell of the house on the Upper East Side, not with my key, which I had left on the kitchen table when I left, but as a stranger. The door was opened by a woman in a light blue uniform, around 50, with a sour face. Yes, she asked, looking me up and down. Good morning, I'm Maya. I've come to pick up some things. Oh, the ex, she said, her expression unchanging. She opened the door and stepped aside. Mr. Thompson said you'd be coming. He's at work. He asked me to supervise you. Supervise me? Like a thief. I nodded without a word and went in. The smell of the house hit me like a fist, a smell of cleaning products, of bland food, mixed with the faint medicinal odor wafting from the room upstairs. But also floating in the air was a new scent, a sweet, cloying perfume. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Carol's. It was foreign, invasive. I'm just getting my personal belongings. I won't touch anything else, I said to the nurse or caregiver or whatever she was. As you wish. I'll be with Mrs. Thompson. Let me know if you need anything, she said. and went up the stairs with heavy steps. I was left alone in the living room. Light streamed through the large windows, illuminating the dust motes already dancing in the air. The sofa where Arthur used to sit and read the paper before his illness. The coffee table where I served coffee. Everything was the same, and yet everything was different. I was no longer part of this set. I was an intruder. I went straight up the stairs to the master bedroom, the one that had been ours. The door was closed. I opened it. The room smelled of him, his cologne, his sweat, his absent sense, and also stronger here, that foreign, sweet, cheap, nauseating perfume. The bed was unmade, the sheets rumpled. On his nightstand, a half-full glass of water. On mine, empty. Nothing of mine remained there. I opened the built-in closet. On one side, his suits perfectly hung his shirts arranged by colour. On the other side, a void where my dresses and coats used to hang. Now there were only bare wooden hangers, swaying slightly in the draught, like the skeletons of something that had died. On the closet floor in the back, I found an old suitcase. My old one. I opened it. Inside, carefully folded, were my memories. The red performance dress, now faded a few blouses from when I worked at a boutique, jeans that wouldn't fit me anymore. Clothes from another life. I took it out and left it on the bed. Then I knelt and lifted the lid of the chest that had served as a bench at the foot of the bed. There it was, my entire past compressed into a space of 3 feet by 1.5. My silk-lined dance shoes, the soles worn and marked by club floors. My castanets wrapped in a handkerchief. A handful of yellowed programs, and at the bottom a cardboard box. I took it out. Inside were the photos. Me dancing at Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Jacob and I smiling with St. Louis Cathedral in the background. A photo of my mother, young and beautiful in a flowy dress. Old letters, journals, and, in a separate envelope, the results of the medical tests I had done 5 years ago after the pains had become unbearable. The ones I never showed anyone. The ones I hid here under everything else. Like you hide a shame. I heard footsteps in the hallway. It was the caregiver. "Mrs. Thompson heard you arrive. She wants to see you." A knot formed in my stomach. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to enter that room. I didn't want to smell the sickness, the sadness, the dependence. I wanted my things and to leave. Tell her. Tell her I'm busy, that I've only come for a few things. The woman looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Pity, perhaps, or contempt. She insists. She says it's important. I sighed. I left the box on the bed and followed the caregiver down the hall. The door to Carol and Arthur's room was ajar. The smell was more intense here, disinfectant, a faint hint of urine, stagnant time. Carol was sitting in her armchair by the window. She wore a robe I had bought her years ago. Her hair, once so meticulously kept, was thin and messy. She looked at me with her blue eyes pale as a winter sky. "Maya," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Hello, Carol. I've just come to get my things. I won't bother you." "You're leaving?" she asked, as if she didn't know. "Yes, I'm leaving." "He doesn't know how to do anything," she said suddenly with a spark of her old aggression. "He can't heat the milk, he burns it. The new nurse is clumsy, she hurts me when she moves me." "You'll get used to it," I said, unable to keep my voice from sounding cold, distant. Carol watched me for a long time. Her gaze travelled over my body, my borrowed clothes, my makeup-free face. "You were right," she murmured suddenly. "About what? That you were dying here. You told me once, years ago. I laughed at you. I said you were being dramatic, that all women make sacrifices. But you were right. Her words surprised me. I hadn't expected lucidity, let alone empathy. It doesn't matter anymore, Carol. Yes, it does, she insisted, and her trembling hand pointed toward her dresser. There in the top drawer. There's something for you. I don't want anything. It's for you, she said with a flash of her old authoritative nature. Take it and get out of here. This house is a tomb. Get out before it buries you too. I blinked, bewildered. The caregiver who stood by the door looked at the floor, pretending not to hear. I went to the dresser. I opened the top drawer. Inside, among handkerchiefs and old stockings, was a small blue velvet box. I picked it up. It was heavy. Open it, Carol ordered. I opened it. Inside, on a faded satin lining, was a brooch, an antique gold pin with a dark stone, perhaps onyx, in the center. It wasn't particularly valuable, but it was beautiful, from another era. It was my mother's, Carol said, her voice breaking a little. She gave it to me on my wedding day. I offered it to my daughter, but she didn't want it. Said it was for old ladies. You never asked me for anything, not even a thank you. So take it. It's yours. I didn't know what to say. This woman, who for 10 years had treated me with a mixture of disdain and dependency, was giving me the only thing of sentimental value she had left. Carol, I can't. Shut up and take it, she huffed, turning her gaze back to the window. And now go. I don't want to see you anymore. You remind me of everything I've lost, of everything I used to be. Go. I closed the box, clutched it in my hand. The cold metal dug into my palm. Thank you, I said, and the word tasted like ash in my mouth. She didn't answer, just kept staring out the window, her proud, broken profile silhouetted against the light. I left the room. As I passed Arthur's bed, I paused for a moment. He lay there the same, connected to the machines, his eyes open but unseeing. I took a deep breath, holding back a wave of contradictory emotions. Pity, anger, relief. Then I left and closed the door behind me. In our room, I started filling the suitcase with my things, the clothes, the shoes, the cardboard box. Everything fit. It wasn't much. 10 years of life reduced to a suitcase and a chest. As I folded my old red dress, something caught my eye. On the floor next to the laundry hamper, the corner of a shirt was sticking out. A lilac silk shirt. It wasn't Jacob's. He would never wear something like that. I pulled it out. It was a woman's shirt, and it was drenched in that scent, the sweet, cheap, invasive perfume. I held it in my hands. The silk was soft, expensive, a style I never would have afforded myself. And there it was, thrown on the floor of our bedroom like a flag of conquest, like a taunt. I heard footsteps on the stairs, quick clicks of heels. Then a woman's voice, young, sing-song. Jake, honey, I bought croissants. Are you here? The voice cut off abruptly as it reached the landing. A young woman, maybe 25, blonde in a tight dress and with a paper tray in her hands, froze when she saw me. Her large, made-up eyes widened like saucers. She smelled exactly like the shirt and the perfume that hung in the air. Oh, she said, recovering quickly. A fake professional smile appeared on her lips. Hi, you must be Maya. Right, Jacob told me about you. I'm Laura, the new daytime caregiver. Lying. Blatantly lying. No caregiver wore stiletto heels or cocktail dress and smelled of expensive perfume at 10 in the morning. No caregiver called her employer Jake, and no caregiver let herself into the house with her own key and croissants. I looked at her without saying a word. I just looked. And there must have been something in my gaze, Some glint of the coldness I felt because her smile faded. She looked down nervously. I'm just here to drop off some reports and leave breakfast. Jacob said he didn't have time for breakfast today. I still said nothing. I folded the lilac shirt carefully as if it were a precious relic and placed it on the bed on Jacob's side. Then I returned to my task, putting my dance shoes in the suitcase. Well, she said, uncomfortable. I'll just leave this in the kitchen then. A pleasure to meet you. She left the bedroom. I heard her heels clicking away down the hall, down the stairs too quickly, then the front door closing. The silence returned, a silence denser, heavier than before. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel pain, just a deep, visceral disgust and an absolute clarity. This was the reality. The shirt, the perfume, Laura. It wasn't just that he had stopped caring about me, it was that he had replaced me even before I was gone. He had brought the scent of another woman into our bed, into our home. While I was upstairs cleaning his father's excrement, I closed the suitcase with a sharp click. I closed the chest. I carried both to the landing. Then I went back to the bedroom, picked up the lilac shirt, and smelled it one last time. That scent would forever be etched in my memory, associated with this moment, with this final liberation. Instead of leaving it there or throwing it in the laundry, I did something strange. I folded it with even more care and placed it in the top drawer of Jacob's nightstand, right on top of the business management book he was never going to finish. Let him find it. Let him smell her perfume when he went to sleep. Let him know that I knew. I brought the luggage downstairs. The real caregiver, the one in the blue uniform, was in the kitchen watching TV at full volume. I'm leaving, I said. She nodded without taking her eyes off the screen. When I got out onto the street, the midday sun hit me full on. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my lungs of the house's stale air, of the smell of sickness and betrayal. I hauled the suitcase and the chest to the corner where a taxi Chloe had ordered was waiting. The driver helped me put my things in the trunk. Where to? He asked. Penn Station, I said before I could think twice. As the taxi pulled away from the Upper East Side, from that life, from the me who had been buried there, I took out the box Carol had given me. I opened it. The brooch shone in the sun. It wasn't a gift of love. It was an acknowledgement, a payment for services rendered a penance. I closed it and tucked it deep into my purse. Then I took out my new phone. I had a message from Chloe. Still alive? Did you have to kill anyone? I smiled faintly. I replied, got everything, including a surprise. It arrived soon. I looked out the window. New York City sped by. People walked, laughed, lived. I had a suitcase, a chest, an onyx brooch, and a completely empty future. And for the first time, that emptiness didn't scare me. It gave me a kind of peace. The peace of a desert after a storm. A vast, clean silence, ready to be filled with new sounds, with new steps. The taxi turned toward the station. The enormous glass and steel building rose before me, full of possibilities, of destinations, of trains departing for anywhere. I closed my eyes. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew with a certainty that shot through me like a lightning bolt that I would never, ever again smell of disinfectant and lies. 1 week, 7 days, an eternity, and the blink of an eye. In Chloe's apartment, time had taken on a strange, elastic quality. It wasn't marked by medication schedules, postural changes, or Carol's cries. It was marked by the sun streaming through the windows, the rhythm of Chloe coming and going from her studio, and the slow, tentative beat of my own heart, learning to beat again. The appointment with the gynecologist, Chloe's friend, was on a Tuesday. doctor. Valeria was a woman in her 40s, with gentle hands and a clear gaze, merciless, but full of immense compassion. She didn't ask uncomfortable questions. She just listened, examined me, ran tests, and then, with the results in hand, sat across from me in her quiet office. "Maya, there's nothing organically severe," she said, her words falling like a blessing in the room. "You have ovarian cysts, several, but they're benign. What you're describing, the pain, the extreme fatigue, the weight loss, is stress. Chronic, severe stress. The kind that leaves a scar. Your body has been in survival mode for so long it's forgotten how to function in normal mode. Can it be cured?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It can be managed. With time, with rest, with doing things that fill you up, not drain you. And with this," she added, writing on a prescription pad. "It's a mild anti-anxiety medication to help you sleep. And this is the contact for a therapist who specializes in caregivers. She's excellent. Call her." I took the papers. They were maps to a new territory, the territory of taking care of myself. That night, for the first time in years, I slept through the night without dreams, without startling at the slightest noise. When I woke up, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like a luxury. It was on the third day that I dared to open the chest. The smell of mothballs and memories hit me as I lifted the lid. There they were, like relics of a lost civilization. I took out the dance shoes, held them in my hands. The black suede was dusty, the wooden soles worn and curved from use. I ran my fingers over the nails on the sole that marked the beat on the floor. A shiver ran down my spine. "Gonna take them for a walk?" Chloe asked from the doorway, leaning against the frame with a coffee cup in her hand. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "They might not fit anymore physically or mentally. Only one way to find out. I'm not ready." "No one is ever ready, Maya. You just start and it comes. Or it doesn't. But you try." She left the cup on the table and came closer. From inside the chest, she pulled out a program from a club in the French Quarter. On the cover, out of focus but full of life, was me, torso bent arms high, my dress frozen in a spin. "You were good," she said without embellishment. "Damn good. People said it. You had that spirit. That was 1,000 lifetimes ago. Spirit doesn't have an expiration date. It hides, but it doesn't leave." She looked at me intently. "I've been asking around, in the dance world, seeing what's up, seeing if anyone remembers Maya Rose." I froze. A mix of panic and something like hope churned in my stomach. "Chloe, no. Yes, and I got lucky. Oh no, you'll see." She pulled her phone from her pocket, searched for something, and showed me the screen. It was a social media profile. The photo was of an older man with grey hair and a moustache, with lively eyes and a wide smile. His name was Silas Kane. The Silent. My old teacher, my first and toughest dance master. "I wrote to him," Chloe said, swiping her finger across the screen. "I told him you were in New York, that you were back. He replied yesterday." She scrolled to the conversation. The messages were brief, typical of Silas, who was never a man of many words. Maya Rose, the kid with the silver flow. Of course I remember. Thought the world had swallowed her whole. Tell her if she's got the guts to come down. Here in New Orleans at the Embers. There's always a spot for someone who isn't afraid of sweat and truth. Tell her to ask for me. I read the message once, twice, 3 times. The words danced before my eyes. The kid with the silver flow. He hadn't called me that in 15 years. I felt a lump in my throat, so large it hurt to swallow. "It's crazy," I managed to say. "I'm out of shape. I've forgotten everything. I'm 38, Chloe. I'm not a kid. You're 38 with a life ahead of you. And Silas Kane doesn't hand out invitations. He knows what he sees. Maybe what he sees is that you need him. For what, to clean the club's bathrooms? Don't be a fool, Chloe snapped, putting her phone away. He's thrown you a lifeline. It's your decision whether to grab it or not. But think about it. It's New Orleans Maya. It's home. It's the dance. It's you. She left the room, leaving me with the shoes in my hands and Silas's message burning in my mind. New Orleans. The smell of beignets and chicory. The sound of saxophones in wrought-iron courtyards. The cry of a blues singer in the hot night. My mother in her sundress clapping in the front row. My father, that charming scoundrel long gone who taught me my first steps before taking off for good. It was too much. I put the shoes down, slammed the chest shut, and ran out of the apartment as if I were being chased. I needed air, I needed noise, I needed not to think. I walked aimlessly through the streets of the East Village. It was mid-afternoon, and the neighborhood was buzzing with life. Tourists, street performers, young people sitting at sidewalk cafes. I let the current carry me away from the ghost of my dancing past, which now had a name, a last name, and a club in the French Quarter. I ended up in Washington Square Park. The afternoon sun gilded the arch and the brownstones. In a corner, a trio of street musicians, 2 guitarists and a singer, were starting to play. It wasn't jazz, it was some light, catchy folk pop for the tourists. But the rhythm, that 4/4 beat, struck something inside me like a switch that had been rusted for years. I leaned against a tree, closing my eyes, letting the music wash over me. The sound of hands clapping to the beat, the strumming of the guitars, the singer's raspy voice. It was like breathing for the first time after being underwater for a long, long time. My feet inside my simple canvas sneakers began to move almost on their own. A faint tap of the heel, then another, a small syncopated rhythm. Nothing showy, just an instinctive ancient dialogue between my body and the music. I don't know how long I stood there, eyes closed, marking a beat I had never forgotten. When I opened them, I saw a group of tourists filming me with their phones. I smiled, embarrassed, and moved away from the tree, but the feeling remained. A tingling in my legs, a warmth in my chest, a memory in my blood, awakening after a long slumber. It's home. It's the dance. It's you. Chloe's words resonated with the echo of the clapping hands. I kept walking, no longer seeing the streets, lost in a whirlwind of fear and need. I passed a sporting goods store. In the window, mannequins in workout clothes. I went in. I bought leggings, running shoes, and a t-shirt. It wasn't a performance dress. They weren't dance shoes. It was a start. When I got back to the apartment, Chloe was in the living room painting. She looked at me, saw the bags, and a slow smile spread across her face. "A plan?" she asked. "A plan." I nodded. I need to get my body back, or what's left of it, before I can think about anything else. The next day, at first light, I put on my new clothes and went down to a small park near the apartment. The air was cool, no one else in sight. I put in my earbuds, found a playlist of instrumental jazz on my phone, and started to run, or rather to jog. After 2 minutes, my lungs ached. After 5, my legs felt like lead. After 8, I had to stop bent over, gasping, my vision blurry. I was a wreck. My body, strong enough to lift a grown man, was weak for this, for freedom. I didn't give up. The next day, I went back, and the next. Each day, 1 more minute. Each day, 1 less painful step. It wasn't just exercise, it was an exorcism. I sweated out the rage, the frustration, the sadness of 10 years. I sweated out the smell of disinfectant. I sweated out the image of the lilac shirt in the nightstand drawer. I sweated out Jacob's voice saying, "That's it." A week after I started running in the park as we were having breakfast, Chloe dropped an envelope on the table. "This is for you." It came to my mailbox. "I don't know how they found you." It was a large envelope of thick paper, my full name written by hand in an elegant old-fashioned script. There was no return address. I opened it with slightly trembling fingers. Inside was a letter and a train ticket. Round trip. New York to New Orleans. For the following weekend. "Dear Maya, Silas told me you were in New York and that you were alive. That's something. I always thought that husband of yours had buried you alive. I see you finally decided to dig your way out. I'm not writing to pity you or offer sympathy. I'm writing because The Embers is without a lead dancer, the one we had ran off to try her luck in LA with some movie producer. To each their own. I'm old, but I'm not a fool. I know you haven't set foot on a stage in 10 years. I know you're probably a mess. But I also know that when the spirit is real, it doesn't get lost. It just hides. And my gut tells me yours is just waiting for a clap on the back to come out. The ticket is for next Friday. Come. Not to work. Just to see, to smell the air, to listen, to remember who you were before you put on that jailer's apron. If after that you want to go back to New York and keep being the shadow of that other woman that's on you. But come. Here in the quarter, people still talk about Maya Rose's flow. It would be a shame if it just became a story. A hug, even if it bothers you. Manuel Silas Kane. P.S. Don't make me waste the ticket. Pride is a foolish thing when you have a chance to come home. The letter fell from my hands. Chloe picked it up and read it quickly. She whistled softly. Wow, that old wolf knows where to bite. "I can't go," I said automatically, but my voice lacked conviction. "Of course you can. You have a ticket. You have an invitation, and most importantly, you have curiosity. I see it in your eyes. I'm scared, Chloe. If you weren't, you'd be an idiot. Of course it's scary. It's scary to look the ghost of what you could have been and weren't in the face. But it's even scarier not to look and to have it haunt you for the rest of your life." I looked at the ticket. New York, New Orleans, round trip. A journey of a few hours. A journey back in time. A journey forward in my life. What if I go and I'm nothing? What if what was there before has dried up? Broken. Then you have a beer, you thank the old man, and you get back on the same train. But you will have looked. You will have known. And that Maya is worth more than all the what-ifs in the world. That night, I took more than just the shoes out of the chest. I took out my old rehearsal clothes, a simple black practice skirt, now out of fashion. I put it on. It didn't close properly at the waist. It was tight in the shoulders, but it was mine. I looked at myself in the mirror on Chloe's closet door. I wasn't the thin, fierce young woman from the photo. I was a woman of almost 40, with grey at my temples, with tired eyes, with a body marked by effort and renunciation. But I was still me. Maya. Maya Rose. Not Thompson. Rose. I put music on my phone, a slow, deep blues piece. The saxophone tore through the living room air. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 10 years, I raised my arms, not with the grace of before, but with clumsiness, with stiffness. But I raised them, and I took a step. Then another. I turned on my own axis, marking a beat my body remembered, even if my mind had forgotten. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't art. It was a struggle, a fight between my will and my dormant muscles. Chloe peeked in the door and stood still, watching. She said nothing, just looked. And in her eyes I saw something that stopped me cold. Tears. Not of pity, of pride. I stopped panting, sweating, my heart racing. That was awful, I said out of breath. It was perfect, she replied, her voice breaking. Because you've started again. That night, with the train ticket on my nightstand, I stared at the ceiling. New Orleans, the French Quarter, the embers, Silas. My mother had been dead for years, my father gone. I had no one left there. Or did I? I had the woman I used to be. And maybe, just maybe, I had the woman I could be again. I picked up my phone, looked up the station number. Then, looking at the paper ticket, I dialed another number, one I still remembered even though I didn't want to. It rang 3 times, then Jacob's voice, tired, irritated. Yeah, what? I said nothing. I just breathed. Looking at the ticket that would take me far away from him, from his foreign perfume, from his house that was a tomb. Maya, is that you? His voice changed. It became more tense. Maya, please talk. The parents... This is a mess. The night nurse quit. I can't handle it all. I need... I hung up. His voice, his complaint, his need, cut off. I turned off the phone. I picked up the train ticket. I kissed it. It was my safe conduct, my escape, my return. On Friday at 9 a.m. with a backpack containing just the essentials and my heart in my throat, I left Chloe's apartment. You sure? She asked at the door. No, I replied. But I'm going anyway. She gave me a tight hug. Well, may the spirit be with you, dancer. In the taxi to Penn Station, we passed his street. Without meaning to, I looked up at the window of the apartment. On the balcony, there was a figure. Jacob was there in a bathrobe, his hair a mess, staring at the street with a lost, defeated expression. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second through the taxi window in the distance. His mouth opened as if to shout something, but I was already far away, accelerating south toward the river, toward the beat that had been waiting 10 years for me to hear it again. The city of New Orleans, seen from the train window, was a mosaic of live oaks, wrought iron balconies, and the green ribbon of the river. A punch of nostalgia, sweet and bittersweet, hit me in the stomach. I was born here. I learned to dance here before I learned to write. I buried my mother here alone because Jacob couldn't or wouldn't accompany me for more than the first 24 hours. The parents, Maya, they can't be left alone. You understand. Yes, I always understood. I got off at Union Passenger Terminal. The air was different, thicker, warmer, laden with the scent of jasmine from nearby gardens. I adjusted my backpack and plunged into the crowd. I wasn't going straight to the quarter. I had a stop to make first. The taxi dropped me at the Lafayette Cemetery. The grand gates, the silence broken only by the chirping of birds. I walked along the gravel paths, past mausoleums and tombs, until I reached a more modest area of simple headstones. There, under a cypress tree, was my mother's. Maria Rose. 1955 to 2017. She danced until the end, a white marble slab already a bit stained with moss and time. In a small stone vase, some withered, dried flowers. No one else came to visit. I knelt not to pray, just to be. Hi, Mum, I whispered, tracing the engraved letters with my fingers. It's been a while. I'm sorry. The wind rustled the cypress leaves, a sound like a whisper. I think I've done something foolish, or maybe the first sensible thing in 10 years. I left Jacob. I left everything. And now I'm here because some grumpy old man called me. Because I think I've forgotten how to dance. Because I've forgotten who I was. And you were the only one who always knew. I placed some fresh flowers daisies I'd bought at a shop near the station in the vase. I took out the old embroidered handkerchief from my grandmother, the one from the box, and cleaned some of the dust off the headstone. You told me on my wedding day. You said, "Don't let them cover you up, daughter. You have to let your shine out, not lock it away." And I did the opposite. I locked it away for so long it almost went out. I think there's still a spark. I'm going to try to fan it. Help me if you can, or at least don't laugh too hard at me from wherever you are. I stood up my knees, cracking a dull, familiar ache in my lower abdomen. Stress, the doctor had said. I stroked my stomach, breathing deeply until it passed. Then I turned and walked away, feeling her presence or the shadow of her memory at my back like a gentle push forward. The French Quarter, the neighborhood, the soul of New Orleans. Crossing Canal Street was like passing through a portal. The air smelled of fried dough, of history, of the damp earth of the river. The narrow streets, the pastel facades, the balconies overflowing with ferns. And everywhere the sound, saxophones drifting from open windows, the tap of feet in a courtyard, a radio tuned to a jazz station. It was a constant symphony, the heartbeat of a city that had never stopped beating. And mine responded immediately, quickening. The Embers wasn't one of the big clubs, the ones in the tourist guides. It was on a dead-end alley near St. Louis Cathedral. The facade was discreet, painted a faded rose with an old wooden door and an unlit neon sign. But as I got closer, I heard it the sound of a guitar being strummed with fury, the sharp clap of hands marking a syncopated beat, and above all, a rapid, precise, clean footwork like a knife. A footwork that spoke of rage, of joy, of life. I pushed the door open. The interior was small. Intimate, a few tables around a slightly raised wooden stage, the walls covered with black and white photos of artists, many long gone. The air was thick with the ghost of cigarette smoke and old candle wax. On stage, a young woman no more than 20 was dancing, sweating her face, a mask of fierce concentration. Her body, thin and strong, broke and turned with a raw, primal energy. It wasn't pretty in the gentle sense of the word. It was truth. It was rage-made movement. And it was spectacular. In the back, sitting on a chair with a guitar in his hands, was him, Silas Kane, the silent. He had aged, of course. His hair, once jet black, was now a messy grey mane. His moustache was white. But his eyes were the same. Black, alive, penetrating like two burning coals. He wasn't looking at the girl. He was looking at the empty space she filled with her dance. He was listening more than watching. The guitar suddenly fell silent. The clapping stopped. The girl froze on the stage, her chest heaving. Her gaze lost somewhere in the distance. Then, as if coming out of a trance, she lowered her head. Silas set the guitar aside and stood up. He approached her, slowly spoke into her ear. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw the girl nod, seriously absorbing every word. Then he clapped her on the shoulder, a gesture of hard-won approval. She stepped off the stage and disappeared through a back door without looking around. Then Silas turned. His eyes landed on me standing quietly by the door. He didn't seem surprised. He just looked at me for what felt like an eternity, scrutinizing me. His gaze traveled over my body from head to toe, like a horse trader assessing an old mare. "Maya Rose," he finally said, his voice raspy from tobacco and years, but with a force that echoed in the empty room. "You're late." "The train was on a schedule, master," I replied, surprised that my voice didn't tremble. A slow smile that didn't reach his eyes formed on his mouth under the moustache. "Master, huh? I like that already. Come closer, let me see you." I walked to the edge of the stage. He didn't come down. He stayed up there looking down at me. "You've changed," he declared. "It's been 15 years. I'm not talking about the years. I'm talking about the light, or the lack of it. They snuffed you out, kid. Almost completely." His words, so direct, so raw, should have hurt. But they were the truth, and the truth, after a decade of lies and half-truths, was a relief. Toy. I said simply, "Why did you come?" "For the ticket, you didn't have to. You could have just called." "I came because you called, and because I needed to hear it." "Hear what?" "This," I said, gesturing to the stage. "The air that's still vibrating with that girl's energy. I needed to remember what the truth sounds like." Silas nodded. Slowly, he came down from the stage with a slightly stiff movement. He came close to me. He smelled of dark tobacco, old sweat, and cheap cologne. "The truth hurts, Maya. It costs you. It leaves marks, as I can see you already know." His gaze rested for a moment on my rough hands, on my burdened shoulders. "I know. And you want more. You want to try to make that little light you have left catch fire again, even if it's just a small flame, the kind that gives warmth, but doesn't light up much." "I don't know if I can." "Who's talking about can? We're talking about want. Do you want to Maya Rose? Do you want to dance again? Even if it hurts, even if it's late, even if it's just for you in a dark corner with no one watching." The question hung in the heavy air. It wasn't about talent, it wasn't about technique. It was about desire, the purest, most essential desire. Did I want this? Did I want this pain, this effort, this brutal truth, instead of the comfortable numbness of the past years? I looked at my sneakers. I looked at his eyes. And somewhere inside me the spark flickered and became a small, trembling but living flame. "Yes," I said, and the word sounded like an oath. "I want to." Silas nodded. For the first time, a real smile that reached his eyes lit up his weathered face. "Then be here tomorrow at 9, with clothes you can get dirty with sweat and floor polish. And be ready. I won't have any mercy. You've got 15 years of rust to shake off, and I'm too old to be wasting my time. Tomorrow. But I have a return ticket for the day after. Change it, or throw it away. If you really want this, your place is here now. Not in New York. Not with that man who turned you into a piece of furniture. Here, in the quarter, sweating until your soul comes out through your feet. Or did you just come for some sentimental tourism?" There was no choice. In reality, there hadn't been one since the moment I read his letter. "I'll be here at 9. Good. Now go, rest. Or don't sleep. Doesn't matter. But be here tomorrow. And don't be late. I hate tardiness almost as much as I hate dancers with no spirit." I left the embers with my legs trembling but with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was purpose, a direction, an order. After a decade of taking orders on how to care for others for the first time, I received one on how to care for myself. And it was hard, demanding, almost cruel. But it was mine. I walked along the banks of the Mississippi until nightfall. The city lights reflected on the dark water. I took out my phone. I had several missed messages from Chloe asking for an update. I wrote back, "I'm alive. It hurts, staying a few more days. The old wolf hasn't bitten. Yet." Then, almost without thinking, I opened the messaging app and typed a number. Not Jacob's cell, the house phone, the landline. I knew at this hour the night nurse would be there. Or maybe not. Maybe he would be there overwhelmed, like in his voicemail. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. "Yeah." It was Jacob's voice. Tired, irritated, profoundly weary. I said nothing. I just breathed, looking at the lights on the river. "Who is this, Maya? Is that you? Please talk. This is impossible." The new daytime caregiver, the one you saw she left, said she couldn't handle the pressure. Mum won't stop crying. Dad had a complication, had to be taken to the hospital this afternoon. I'm here alone. I don't know what to do. Maya, please. His voice broke. It was a sound I had never heard. Jacob crying, or close to it. Defeated. For a second, the old instinct, the caregiver's, the wife's, kicked in. I wanted to ask which hospital, what complication, if he needed anything. I wanted to offer help. I wanted to go back. But then I looked at my hands resting on the river railing. They no longer smelled of bleach. They smelled of stage dust and open air. And I heard in my memory the dry beat of Silas's rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Jacob, I said, and my voice sounded calm, clear from an infinite distance. Yes, yes, honey. The pathetic hope in his tone. The main gas valve is in the silverware drawer in the kitchen. You have to shut it off if you leave the house for more than a day. You always used to forget. Goodbye. I hung up. I turned off the phone, put it in my pocket. I looked at the river one last time, breathed the New Orleans air, and walked away from the railing. Not backward. Forward. Toward the cheap motel where I'd booked a room. Toward the 9 a.m. class. Toward the pain that awaited me. Toward the life that finally, after so long, was beginning again. And this time, I wasn't going to take care of anyone but myself. The New York air smelled of recent rain and diesel, a scent that no longer felt familiar after weeks in New Orleans, where the air smelled of the river of earth and of sun-scorched jasmine. I had returned only for this grey morning, for this final formality, for this door I had to walk through to close another forever. The facade of the city clerk's office was exactly as I remembered it from when I came excited and nervous 15 years ago. Grey stone, wide steps, a city seal worn down by pollution. Nothing had changed. I, on the other hand, had changed everything. I wore the same simple outfit of black pants and a blouse I had worn to the lawyer's office. In my backpack, only the essentials documents, a water bottle, and the return ticket to New Orleans for that same afternoon at 6:05 p.m. I had no intention of spending another night in New York. Ms. Hayes was already waiting for me on the steps, trench coat on and umbrella in hand. Good morning, Maya. Ready. As I'll ever be. He hasn't arrived yet, nor his lawyer. Typical. I didn't mind. I breathed in the damp air, watching the people coming and going. Young couples, hand in hand, their faces a mix of happiness and fear. Families with babies to register. And others like me with serious expressions, the look of someone closing a chapter. Life in its eternal cycles, entering and exiting through the same doors. A taxi screeched to a halt. Jacob got out. He was tieless, his shirt wrinkled, and a jacket that didn't match his pants. He had deep, bruise-like dark circles under his eyes. His hair, always so perfect, was a mess. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Behind him, Ms. Vega, his lawyer, with her impeccable pantsuit and a look of barely concealed annoyance. Sorry, the traffic, Jacob muttered without looking me in the eye. No matter, we're on time, Ms. Hayes said curtly. Let's go. The inside was cold with marble floors that echoed. It smelled of official paper and disinfectant. A clerk with a bored expression directed us to a waiting room with blue plastic chairs. We sat Jacob and his lawyers on one side, Ms. Hayes and I on the other. A river of hostile silence separated us. The minutes passed, the ticking of a wall clock, the murmur of distant voices, the thud of a stamp. Jacob couldn't stop tapping his foot, looking at the clock, running a hand over his face. The tension emanating from him was almost palpable. In contrast, I felt strangely serene. I had made my peace with this. I had cried, sweated and bled for this on the wooden floor of the Embers. This, the paperwork, was just the epilogue. Maya, Jacob said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in days. I looked at him. I said nothing. Are you okay? He asked. And in his tone there was something that wasn't concern, but rather a hint of disbelief, as if he couldn't understand how I could be sitting there whole, not falling apart. Yes, Jacob, I'm okay. He shook his head, as if my answer were an insult. My parents, my father had pneumonia. He was in the hospital. It's been very hard. Miss Vega touched his arm, a warning gesture. Don't talk about that here, it seemed to say. He flinched, but didn't take his eyes off me. His eyes scrutinized me, searching for cracks, for weak points. He found only a smooth wall. And you, he insisted. Where are you? Chloe won't tell me anything. I've called you. I've been away, I said without giving more details. With someone else. The question came out like a whip, loaded with a sudden, petty resentment. Ms. Hayes opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. That's not your business anymore, Jacob. Just like the lilac shirt that smelled of cheap perfume I found in our bedroom wasn't my business. Or was it? He turned pale. Ms. Vega rolled her eyes. My lawyer hid a smile. It wasn't. It's not what you think, Jacob stammered. But his voice lacked conviction. I don't think anything. Not anymore. Just then the clerk peeked her head through the door. Thompson. Thompson. Come in. The judge's chamber was small, sober, a middle-aged man in a robe with a face that had seen too many dramas to be fazed. He sat behind a desk. He gestured for us to sit in front of him. The ritual was quick, bureaucratic, stark. Formulary questions, monosyllabic answers, confirmation that it was by mutual consent, the warning about the legal effects, the ratification of the division of assets, where I, as it was stated, renounced everything. The judge looked at me over his glasses. You understand, Mrs. Rose, that with your signature you renounce any future financial right derived from this marriage, including any potential alimony. I understand perfectly, and you do so freely without any coercion, more freely than I've done anything in the last 10 years. The judge blinked, surprised by the frankness of my answer. Then he nodded, passed the documents for us to sign. Jacob signed first, with a large, nervous signature. I signed after him. The same signature as always, but this time it felt different. It wasn't a stroke on paper. It was a clean cut. The judge stamped the seal with a dry thud. The sound echoed in the silent room. The marriage is hereby dissolved. You are free. Here are your copies. Good luck. We left the chamber. In the hallway, the feeling was strange. There was no relief, no sadness. It was like leaving a movie theatre after a very long, exhausting film. The light of the real world seemed too bright, too raw. Jacob stopped, leaning a hand against the wall. He took a deep breath. Miss Vega was speaking to him in a low voice, giving him instructions about some papers, but he didn't seem to be listening. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Anger, regret, relief, perhaps a mixture of everything. Ms. Hayes gave my arm a light squeeze. It's official. It's done. Do you need anything else? No, thank you. You've handled everything perfectly. Then this is goodbye. And good luck, Maya. Truly. She gave me a card. In case you ever need anything. I nodded and put it away. She left with her efficient heel clicks, leaving Jacob and me alone in the hallway. Ms. Vega, after a look of discomfort, muttered something about waiting outside, and also walked away. The two of us were left under the cold, fluorescent light, with the sound of rain beginning to beat against the building's large windows. The silence was thick, heavy, with everything unsaid, with everything broken. "And now?" Jacob finally asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Now I get a taxi and go to the station. You go to your home, to your life, my life." He let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "What life, Maya? My father is half dead in a bed. My mother has stopped talking. The house is a hell. My work is falling apart. This is the life you've left me with." His words, his victim tone were the spark, the final straw. The serenity that had enveloped me cracked, revealing the cold, hard core of truth I had been polishing in silence for years. "The life I've left you with?" I asked, and my voice was so cold that even he was startled. "I did, Jacob. You took mine from me. You and your family took it 10 years ago. Only now it's your turn to carry the weight, and you can't handle it, can you? You have no idea what it's like." "Of course I know, I've seen it," he protested with a flash of his old arrogance. "You didn't look. You didn't see." I took a step closer. He backed away, as if my coldness were contagious. "Do you want to know what you've seen, Jacob? Do you want to know what those 10 years really were?" He said nothing, just stared at me with wide eyes. "They were waking up every 2 hours every night to change your father's position so he wouldn't get covered in sores. They were smelling the scent of urine and defeat every morning before the coffee. They were listening to your mother cry, not for your father, but for her lost youth, and having to comfort her while no one comforted me. They were learning to insert a feeding tube without gagging. They were giving up saying goodbye to my own mother when she died, because they couldn't be left alone here. They were pains in my abdomen so strong I would sometimes collapse and getting up anyway because there was no backup. They were looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back. They were little by little, day by day, becoming a piece of furniture, a pair of useful hands, a ghost." My voice didn't break. Each word was a block of ice thrown with pinpoint accuracy. Jacob was pale, motionless. "And you were just there. You passed through. You slept in our bed. And then into our bed, you brought the smell of another woman. And you had the nerve to tell me that I had let myself go." A twisted smile with no trace of humor formed on my lips. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Jacob. I chose to care even if it killed me. You just chose to run away. And now when running is no longer an option, you complain that the weight is too much. Well, welcome to the weight. Let's see how long you last." Jacob opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His face was a mask of shock, as if for the first time he was seeing not the dishevelled woman he despised, but the true, monstrous scope of his neglect. I didn't know about the pain," he managed to stammer. "Why didn't you ask?" I exploded, and for the first time I raised my voice, a contained shout that echoed in the empty hall. "Never in 10 years did you ask, 'Maya, how are you?' You never saw me. You only saw what I did for you. And you were so blind, you didn't even see that I was dying. And when I signed those papers, you were surprised I didn't cry. You know why I didn't cry, Jacob? Because I had no tears left. I used them all up one by one, cleaning your father's arse and enduring your mother's contempt. The last ones left me the day my mother was lowered into her grave, and I couldn't be there to hold her hand." The words poured out like a torrent, unstoppable, venomous, true. There was no holding back anymore, no reason to be silent. Jacob took another step back, leaning against the wall. His breathing was ragged, his eyes were glassy. "No, you can't say that. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And you know it. Deep down, you've always known it. That's why it was so easy for you to ignore me, because truly seeing me would have meant having to do something. It would have meant having to get off the pedestal you'd put yourself on and get your hands dirty. And you, Jacob, have never ever wanted to get your hands dirty. I fell silent. The echo of my words faded, absorbed by the rain and the silence of the building. I was panting slightly, not from effort, but from release. I had said everything. Everything that had fermented inside me for a decade of silence. Jacob slid down the wall until he was almost sitting on the floor. He wasn't crying. He seemed to be in a state of shock. His eyes fixed on the marble floor, didn't blink. "I just wanted us to be happy," he murmured in a childish, whining tone. That sentence, that last pathetic justification, was what triggered my final definitive truth. The one I had saved like a last missile, not out of cruelty, but because until that moment I hadn't found a target worthy enough. I crouched down to his level. Our eyes met, mine clear and dry, his shattered and lost. "Happy Jacob," I said, my voice regaining that terrifying calm, the calm of someone with nothing left to lose. "Let me tell you one last thing so you know exactly the price of your happiness, the price of those 10 years. I paused, making sure every word would be seared into his memory. "The doctor saw me 3 weeks ago, after years of pain, of bleeding, of an exhaustion that wasn't normal. After you, every time I complained, told me I was exaggerating, that we were all tired." I took a deep breath. "I have severe pelvic fibrosis, adhesions, internal scars from so much strain, so much stress from lifting weights my body wasn't made for. It's chronic, it's painful, and it has almost certainly left me sterile. The cysts, the damage, it's irreversible." His face completely crumbled, his mouth opened in a grimace of horror. "What?" "Yes, Jacob. While you were working on your happiness, and then bringing Laura and her cheap perfume into my home, the body you were using to care for your parents was destroying itself from the inside. I will never be able to have children. Maybe I haven't been able to for a long time after so much neglect. That was the price. My body, my chance to be a mother, all for caring for your family." I fell silent. I had said the sentence, the nuclear truth, the one that reduced everything to rubble. Jacob looked at me, and finally the tears I hadn't shed gushed from his eyes. They weren't discreet tears. They were brutal, ragged sobs that shook his entire body. He covered his face with his hands, and his back convulsed with moans. It was the cry of a man who suddenly sees the abyss beneath his feet and understands that he dug it himself. "No. God, no, Maya. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean to." The words, broken, choked by sobs, came out from between his fingers. I stood up. I looked at him there, curled into a ball on the floor of the city clerk's office. A successful, wealthy man shattered by the truth. I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. A cold, bitter, and completely insufficient justice, because it wouldn't bring back anything I had lost. "Now you know," I said, adjusting the strap of my backpack on my shoulder. "And with that, I wish you good luck, Jacob. You're going to need it more than I will." I turned and walked down the hallway, away from him, from his sobs, from the life that had been my prison. His moans grew louder, desperate. I heard him scream my name through his tears. "Maya, Maya, please, wait. Forgive me, please." I didn't stop. I didn't turn my head. I walked toward the main door, toward the New York rain, toward the waiting taxi, toward the 6:05 p.m. train toward New Orleans, toward the river, toward the beat that was waiting for me to dance my new life, with the scars on display, and my soul at last unburdened. 1 year later, the New Orleans night air was warm, sweet, heavy with the scent of jasmine and expectation. Outside the club, the embers, a line of people snaked down the alley. Posters plastered on the rose-colored facade announced, "Maya Rose returned to the source, one night only." Below was a black and white photo, not of the young dancer of long ago, but of the woman I was now. My grey-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, my eyes creased with expression, my gaze direct, defiant, filled with a powerful calm. I wasn't smiling. I was observing. Inside, the buzz was a contained roar. The place was packed to the rafters, not just tourists, but familiar faces from the dance world. Critics, old masters, and Chloe in the front row in a fire engine red dress, holding the hand of her new girlfriend, an Italian sculptor who kept looking around in awe. Behind the coarse canvas curtain, I breathed. Not the nervous gasp of the girl I once was, but a deep, conscious breath that filled every corner of my lungs. I wore a simple black performance dress. It wasn't a flashy outfit. It was a battle uniform. My shoes the same old ones, but remade with new soles. On my skin, the marks, the scars from falls in rehearsal. The hard callus on my instep. The rough hands that no longer spoke only of bleach, but also of the friction of the wooden floor and castanets. Silas. The silent approached, leaning on his cane. His health had declined in the last year, but his eyes were still the same burning coals. "Ready, kid? Ready, master. It's not going to be perfect. I don't want it to be perfect. I want it to be true. Oh, it'll be that." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was his equivalent of a hug. "All of the quarter and half of New Orleans is out there. And the ghost of your mother, I'm sure. Go out there and stomp on all of them. Or sing to them. Or whatever comes out. But let it out. No fear." The old companion, the ache stirred in my lower belly. A dull, permanent reminder. I accepted it the way you accept a scar. I no longer fought it. I danced with it. The lights went down. A sudden charged silence fell over the club. Then a single harsh white spotlight illuminated the center of the empty wooden stage. I walked out. Not with a triumphant entrance. I walked slowly, deliberately, to the center of the circle of light. I stood there still. I let them look at me. Let them see the 39-year-old woman with her grey hairs, her wrinkles, her body, that was not a young girl's, but a survivor's. I didn't lower my gaze. I scanned the audience slowly, face by face, without smiling. In the gloom of a back corner near the door, a figure flinched as my gaze passed over. I couldn't make them out. I didn't care. Then I raised my arms. Not with the ethereal grace of before, but with a heavy, earthy movement, as if unearthing something. My fingers, slightly curved, trembling at first, tensed. And I waited. From the darkness, a guitar tore through the silence. It wasn't a melody. It was a long, deep, ragged cry. It was Silas's guitar, but his nephew was playing it, a young man with fingers of fire who had captured the essence of what I needed. A lament. That sound pierced me. I was no longer Maya Rose, the ex-wife, the ex-caregiver. I was a body full of stories, and the first story I wanted to tell was one of rage. My heels struck the floor. 1, 2, 3 sharp raps like gunshots, then a quick flurry, a percussive phrase that cracked like a whip. I wasn't dancing to please, I was dancing to tear. My arms broke into aggressive angles. My face was a mask of fierce concentration. Every heel stomp was a "that's it." I had never screamed. Every turn an attempt to shake off arms that no longer held me. It was the rage of 10 years of silence turned into sound, into rhythm, into the sweat that was beginning to soak my back. The audience was mesmerized. There was no joy in this dance. There was truth. And truth, when it's pure, is gripping. It hurts, and it captivates. The guitar shifted from a lament to something more intimate, more painful. A slow, deep blues, the kind that speaks of loss. I stopped sweat running down my temples. I took a deep breath and let the rage settle, revealing what lay beneath it. The grief, an ancient black grief like a bottomless pit. My movements became slower, more internal. My arms no longer broke. They wrapped around my torso as if protecting something, as if cradling a void. My feet no longer stomped. They dragged, marking a rhythm of farewell. My gaze was lost in the emptiness beyond the audience. I was no longer in the club. I was in the room on the Upper East Side next to Arthur's bed. I was in the cemetery in front of my mother's grave. I was in the doctor's office hearing the word sterile. A single, impertinent tear escaped my eye and traced a shining path down my dusty cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall, let it mix with the sweat on my neckline. This was the grief for what was irretrievable, for the lives not lived, for the children who would never come, for the youth spent caring for an old age that was not my own. The young man on the guitar felt it. His music became softer, more mournful. A discreet accompaniment to my pain made dance. Then another transition. A roll of fingers on the guitar's body. An announcement. The music began to build, to rise. It wasn't joy yet. It was determination, strength. I lifted my head. The tear was dry. The grief danced out, expelled, was transforming into something else. Into power. Into an I am here. I began to mark a faster, more complex beat. The footwork became sharp, precise, a shower of sounds that spoke of a craft recovered of muscles, that remembered of a soul reclaiming what was its own. I turned once, twice. The black skirt opened like a pair of dark wings. These weren't the dizzying spins of a 20-year-old. They were the turns of a woman who knows the weight of the floor, who knows what it is to fall, and who still chooses to spin. The audience began to clap. Timidly at first, then with more force, caught up in the rhythm, in the transformation they were witnessing on stage. "Go, Maya!" Chloe shouted in her hoarse voice, and others followed. I no longer heard them. I heard the blood in my ears, the beat in my bones. Silas's voice saying, "Let it out." And I let it all out. The broken woman, the strong woman, the woman reborn from her own ashes, with scars and with pride. The music reached its climax, a whirlwind of sound. And with a final furious flurry of footwork that sounded like a definitive slamming door, I stopped. Arms high, head up, chest heaving, drenched in sweat, flooded with light. Still. The silence was absolute for a second that lasted an eternity. Then the explosion. The applause, the shouts, the olés rose like a wave, filling the small club, threatening to take the roof off. Whistles, stomps on the tables. It was a wild, true acknowledgement. I lowered my arms. My breath ragged, a small, real smile appearing on my lips. It wasn't for the audience. It was for me. I had done it. I had come back. Not to who I was, but to who I was now. As I came off the stage amidst hugs and pats on the back, my gaze inevitably went to that back corner near the door. The spot was empty, just a vacant chair, and on the floor beside it, a small object reflecting the light. I made my way through the crowd, indifferent to the congratulations. It was a man's handkerchief, expensive silk navy blue, and on top of it something hard and cold. I picked it up. It was the brooch. Carol's onyx brooch, the one she had given me the day I left. But it wasn't alone. Next to it, clumsily hooked onto the old mechanism, was a ring. His wedding band. I had taken mine off a year ago and thrown it into the Mississippi from the bridge. I took the brooch. The ring I left on the floor. A waiter would pass by later and step on it, or they would sweep it up. I didn't care. Chloe fought her way toward me, her eyes shining. "You killed it, kid. You absolutely killed it. They were crying. I saw critics crying. Did you see him?" she asked as I showed her the brooch. Her smile vanished. She nodded gravely. "Yes, he was there, in the back. He came late left before you finished. But I saw him. I saw him when you started the slow part, the grief part. He got up and left. He couldn't take it." She paused. "He looked awful, Maya. Haggard. Old." I said nothing. I closed the brooch in my palm. The metal was cold. Flashback 3 months earlier. New York. Jacob hung up the phone. Another. No. The third nursing home to reject his father for admission. Too high needs, requires specialized palliative care. We don't have a bed. The house was a wasteland. It smelled of sickness and spoiled food. The last caregiver, an Ecuadorian woman with a heart of gold but clumsy hands, had left the week before after Carol, in a fit of furious lucidity, had called her a thief. Now no one wanted the job. He was alone. His father Arthur had gotten worse. The pneumonia had left him weaker, more absent. He just breathed. His mother Carol had retreated into an almost total silence. She only spoke to ask for something or to curse her fate. Or him. His contracting empire, the one that had grown while Maya held his world together, was crumbling. Clients noticed his absence, his mistakes, his lack of focus. His partner was talking about him, taking some time. And Laura of the sweet perfume had lasted exactly 6 weeks. She left the day she had to help him clean up his father after an intestinal accident. "I didn't sign up for this, Jake. You told me they were just delicate old people, not this." She left, taking her perfume and the last shred of illusion he had left. Jacob poured himself a whiskey, his third of the morning. He sank onto the living room sofa, the same one where his father used to read the paper. It was empty now. He looked around. The perfect house, the perfect life he had built, was a sham. And the pillar that held it up, the one he never saw, was gone. And in leaving, she had taken the ground from under his feet. His phone vibrated. An email from a contact, an old friend from New Orleans. "Is this your ex? Wow. What a comeback." Attached was a link to a New Orleans culture magazine. Maya rose, the return of a spirit that never left. His heart pounding, he clicked. There she was in the photo on the stage of a club called the Embers, dancing. Or rather, warring. Her expression was one of painful, powerful intensity. She was no longer the muted woman who had signed the divorce papers. She was someone else. Someone whole. Someone free. And here he was, in the middle of the ruin he had created, drowning in whiskey and his own filth. The crying started again. The brutal sobs that had ambushed him ever since that day at the clerk's office when his world had shattered. He cried for his father, for his mother, for his business. But most of all, he cried for her. For what he had done to her, for what he had destroyed, for the phrase that echoed in his head every night, sharp and lethal, almost certainly sterile. He who had never wanted children, who saw them as a hindrance to his career, suddenly understood the monstrous scope of his theft. He had stolen her choice. He had stolen a possible future. He had stolen pieces of her body, of her soul. and all while she was taking care of what he loved most. He staggered up, went to the bedroom, opened his nightstand drawer. There, under some papers, was still the lilac shirt. It no longer smelled of perfume. It smelled of dust and guilt. He took it out, and for the first time, he smelled not betrayal, but his own misery. That night he went to his mother's side. Carol was in her armchair staring at nothing. "Mom," he said hoarsely. "Maya. Maya is going to dance. In New Orleans. In a club." Carol turned her head slowly. Her pale blue eyes rested on him. There was a flicker, something like painful recognition. "That was her thing," she murmured in her broken voice. "Dancing. Until we tied her down here. Until you tied her down here. I didn't— Yes, you. I was sick. Your father was a living corpse. But you were healthy. You could have set her free. And instead you passed the chain to her." A rare, precious tear appeared in her eye. "Me too. I helped you. Because I was scared. And now look where we are. And look at her. Flying with our broken chains." Carol turned her head back to the window, ending the conversation, and with it any shred of complicity that had existed between them. Jacob stood there, his mother's condemnation ringing louder than any judge's verdict. She was right. He had held the keys, and he had used them to lock her in. End flashback. Now. New Orleans. Dawn. After the performance, the party at the Embers went on until sunrise. Laughter, wine, music, hugs. I received offers from a bigger club for a tour, even from a French choreographer who spoke of the authenticity of transformed pain. I listened, I thanked them. I didn't say yes to anything. For the first time in my life, time was my own. I was going to spend it however I pleased. When I left, the sky over the river was beginning to lighten from dark blue to a pale indigo. The cool air cleansed the smell of sweat and wine from my skin. Chloe and her girlfriend had left exhausted. Silas had retired hours ago spent, but with a satisfied ear-to-ear grin. I walked alone toward the bridge. I needed the silence. I needed the river. In the middle of the bridge, I stopped. I took two things from my bag, Carol's onyx brooch and Jacob's wedding band, which I had eventually picked up from the floor. I looked at the slow, powerful river under the dawn light. This river had taken everything, my childhood, my mother, my first love, and a year ago my wedding ring. I opened my hand. The brooch gleamed faintly. It wasn't my past. It was a trophy, a recognition of the war I had fought and won. I closed my hand around it again and put it away. I was going to keep it as a reminder that even from shipwrecks, beautiful things can be salvaged. Then I looked at Jacob's gold band. Simple, masculine, heavy with broken promises. I felt nothing. Not hatred, not resentment. Just a light emptiness, the kind that remains after a very old pain has gone. No dramatic gesture was needed. I just opened my fingers and let it fall. The ring spun a few times, catching a glint of the dawn, before disappearing with a faint plop into the dark waters of the Mississippi. There was no ceremony, it was just done. I leaned on the railing, looking east, where the sun was beginning to peek out. The air smelled of the river of life of the future. The pain in my belly was there, a constant reminder, but it was no longer a chain. It was part of my geography, like my grey hairs, like my scars. I knew Jacob was broken. I knew it from the calls from unknown numbers I never answered. From his mother's increasingly confused messages that sometimes came to the old phone I barely used. I knew his life had fallen apart. And I didn't feel joy. I felt nothing. His suffering no longer belonged to me, just as mine no longer belonged to him. I had paid an enormous price for my freedom, but now at last I was free. Not from him, from the woman I was with him, from the prison, the guilt, the duty, the invisibility. The sun finally emerged, a brutal sliver of gold over the New Orleans skyline. It lit up the river, the bridges, the oak trees. It lit up my weathered face with the traces of years and battles. And I smiled, a wide, peaceful smile that filled my whole being. I turned my back on the river and started walking toward the quarter, toward the smell of fresh coffee and hot beignets, toward the new day, toward the life that against all odds, against all loss, I had managed to reclaim for myself alone. Not as anyone's shadow, as Maya Rose, a dancer, and finally the master of her own painful, glorious rhythm.